Hello to all and welcome. My name is Sam Redston, and as the CEO of the Naomi Milgrom Foundation, the foundation behind Living Cities Forum and its companion initiative, MPavilion, it is my great pleasure to introduce this conversation with Traudy Pelzel and Francesco Magnani of MAP Studio, the Venetian architectural practice behind MPavilion 2021. Before we begin today's conversation, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which I speak to you today, and upon which the MPavilion and the Living Cities Forum have been created, the land of the Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung people of the Greater Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and those who may be with us today, and particularly in this online forum. I extend that respect to all First Nations people across Australia and around the world. The Naomi Milgrom Foundation exists to champion art, design, and architecture to improve lives and the livability for all communities. The flagship initiative of the Foundation's expansive portfolio of projects is MPavilion, the seasonal cultural laboratory that's come to be one of the most beloved highlights of Melbourne's festival calendar. And now, after a pandemic-induced season away from our home site, MPavilion makes its much anticipated return to the Queen Victoria Gardens for our 8th summer season in the shape of an extraordinary new pavilion designed by Italian architectural practice, MAP Studio. On behalf of the Naomi Milgrom Foundation, I'd like to thank architect Sean Godsell, Nigel Burden and the team at ACOM, Carla Halasa and Osma Oliveira and the team at Scavello, Wayne Liddy and the team at Gardner Group, who have all collaborated for nearly 2 years, often from their homes, to realise MAP Studio's remarkable design for the MPavilion 2021. And I'd also like to thank Louise Nicholson, my colleague, the project director for Naomi Milgrom Foundation, for ensuring this team maintained an effective collaborative framework despite the incredible challenges of the last 18 months. And then, of course, there are our principal partners, the City of Melbourne, the State Government of Victoria through Creative Victoria, RACV, and our other supporters, without whom it would simply not be possible to work with the hundreds of people across Victoria and around the world who breathe life into MPavilion every year. On behalf of the Naomi Milgrom Foundation, I thank you for your immense generosity. And I'd now like to welcome my colleague Jen Zielinska, the Creative Director of MPavilion, to say a few words before we hear from Francesco Magnani and Traudy Pelzel.
Hello and welcome. My name is Jen Zielinska and I'm the Creative Director of MPavilion. If there is one thing that the last season of MPavilion has taught us, it is that in uncertain times, you have to be ready to adapt. So thank you for being here with us today, watching from your homes instead of at the Edge Theatre in Federation Square as originally planned. We definitely know the drill in Melbourne, and I'm deeply grateful to all who helped make today's changes happen. Every year since Sean Godsell designed the first MPavilion in 2014, MPavilion has been realised both as a programme and as a physical pavilion, located on the land of the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation in the Queen Victoria Gardens. The exception to this cycle was, unsurprisingly, our 2020 programme, the season that was originally slated to take place in MAP Studio MPavilion. Thanks to the passion, commitment and imagination of the MPavilion team and our collaborators, the 2020 season realised the impossible and unfolded both online and in person, first on our website, then at the pavilions of past seasons, now located around Melbourne, and finally at the Parkade car park in Melbourne's CBD. MPavilion 2020 was a huge feat to pull off, one that happened because of the incredible people we get to work with saying yes at a time when so much seemed to be saying no. And it is precisely these challenges of that season that make the coming MPavilion 2021 the season where we return to our home site in the Queen Victoria Gardens feel all the more exciting. We've waited a long time to see MAP Studio's MPavilion, almost 2 years, and now the wait is finally over. MPavilion is coming home. In all the style and surprise and spirit of invitation that has animated it every season since 2014. I now invite you to join architect Amy Muir of MUIR Architecture in meeting Traudy and Francesco of MAP Studio to hear the story of the MPavilion 2021.
Hi, Traudy and Francesco. It's so lovely to be here today speaking with you both. Us in lockdown, you in Venice, but wonderful to be here today. So I just wanted to ask a few questions and speak about your design. It's wonderful to see how this has been coming together over the last couple of years. But when we speak to the program of the pavilion that sits within the established Queen Victoria Gardens, what were some of the initial observations that you brought to the project?
So we have the chance. Hello, Amy.
Hello.
Happy to be here with you, even so far from Venice, as you say. And we have the chance to visit the site 2 years ago, Victoria Gardens, and we thought, we believe it's a very interesting place in between the heart of Melbourne, and it's also a very interesting place in terms of topography, because it's a kind of basin, no? Coming from St. Kilda Road, and having also this backdrop of the trees of the small hill, and also the open view to the city, to the other side of the Yarra River, because it's so for that is full of suggestion in some way, even if the program apparently is easy as a pavilion, but there are a lot of items coming from this articulation.
Yeah, so I think the other thing that's inherent about the pavilion is that it's a civic intervention, and it's located within Melbourne's arts precinct. And this is an inherently generous intervention. Could you talk about that, just as conceptually, how that fed into your design?
So, well, our idea was to work a lot in a way with this idea of trigger of cultural events. So the pavilion, in a way, it's a device that is amplifying what is inside and outside. So we thought a kind of shimmering device in which there are a lot of mirrors that are reflecting the activities under the pavilion, the activities around the pavilion, and the colors of the environment and the sky, and everything is around. So it's something like a kind of, in a way, a lighthouse that is enlightening the cultural program of the pavilion, and it's spreading all over the city in a way. This was our concept.
Yeah, lovely. So you are both pavilion number 7, and there've been several, obviously, iterations which have embraced and challenged the site's conditions. And each pavilion has provided varying interpretations associated with the notion of gathering. Could you please talk about that? You know, the pavilion engages with this, you know, how does that compare to the other pavilions that we've seen over the years?
So, in a way, we didn't work with a shelter. This was a choice that was in the beginning, but was less clear. But then during the pandemic period, it was going deeper and deeper. So we wanted to work with a volume, an abstract volume that was working with nature in a kind of opposition way. And also this idea that was a kind of stage, a kind of stage that was putting in the middle of the people that was gathering around, and so it was working with the activities and so on, but people can stay inside and outside without any kind of real roof. It's something more interactive in a way. In the beginning, our ideas of the volume was also to provide a kind of basilica space in a way that we intend in a classical way, a place in which the people are meeting are having civic meeting in a way, for cultural, for discuss, to propose something for the community. But then with this coming of the pandemic period, we slightly move to this concept of a stage to gather people around.
Yeah, and it's sort of interesting because when we talk about, time, which we all know is an incredibly precious commodity, particularly when we talk about the development and gestation of ideas. And we understand that obviously due to the pandemic, your program was extended, but I'm just wondering how this may have influenced the final outcome, whether that sort of, that extended timeline had an impact, negative or positive, on the way that it resulted.
First of all, I think I really believe that the time of a process of creation, as we know, is not linear in some way. So sometimes you have a very short times and the idea comes from the beginning, very strong, and sometimes you need a lot of time to focus on the ideas. And I think in this case, the main concept in some way comes from the beginning. This idea of the lighthouse in some way, and as Traudy said, probably the time and also the situation of the pandemic in some way consent to go deeper through the device that are apparently easy in a pavilion, as the relation with the ground floor, the managing of the relation of the people that are able to enjoy some facilities, for example, and these kind of things, and probably it has consent to go deep in this sense. In some way, yes, it's an opportunity, but also if you focus from the beginning to the main concept of a project, also is a kind of danger to have too many time, no? Because it's a balance of two things in some way, because sometimes more times means more doubts in some way. Not the case, but okay. That it's not a linear process, no.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's sort of interesting as well, because you commenced designing before we even knew that a pandemic existed. Did the pandemic in any way influence some of the development of the design, or did the design remain fairly intact?
The main concept, as I said, of the lighthouse, and to work with something in some way a little bit different as a shelter, as Traudy said, as a roof, and work with this backdrop of the trees in some way, with the scale of this element to be appreciated from afar. Also, arriving to Victoria Gardens was the main choice coming from the beginning. Probably, yes, this idea at the beginning, also we were considering to manage this relation with the abstraction of this element and a kind of roof, or on the top or inside, and also to have a different attitude of the relationship to the ground floor. As Traudy said, concerning the idea of basilica, we have got some design of the ground with some steps that are a linear system where people are able to sit and to stay more close in some way, with this idea and this concept were developed more and were articulated as the solution is now. Right? And so this idea to be a stage and the people can stay all around, also a little bit inside. Also, there is this volume of facilities of the small kiosk. This relations.
In a way, is less oriented than in the beginning. In the beginning, was really oriented, and the people were supposed to sit and to stay there in a fixed point in a way. And then we lost completely this idea, of course.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating.
It's more usable now in some way, no? Because if the condition consent to do something, okay. If the condition
are getting worse, so it could be used in a different way, or if it's getting better.
Yeah.
This is, I think this concept, sorry, I mean, this concept of house also has a meaning in this changing condition. Because very important that the edition was planned in the region for the last year, 2020, and so as obviously said, to be in a condition like what we experiment, and for that also this idea to bring light and to hope this we will be able to have this situation on
this
the back.
period on the back.
Yeah. No, I mean it's a very positive outcome to date, so it's exciting. But completely appreciate. Yeah, and completely appreciate where you're coming from. One of the other things, Melbourne architect Sean Godstall designed the very first MPavilion in 2014. Sean and Matt were both invited to contribute to the Vatican Chapels exhibition as part of the 2018 Venice Architecture Biennale. A total of 10 chapels and 1 pavilion, which you both designed, defining various interpretations of Gunnar Asplin's Woodland Chapel. I thought that this was an absolute highlight of the 2018 Biennale, as we were able to experience varying built interpretations within a very beautiful woodland setting. How do you see this work? Because I think, anything that we do will ultimately influence the next project that we work on. And given two very different contexts, two very different briefs, but how did that inform the MPavilion?
Well, these are two pavilions, but completely different in a way in the meaning. Even the notion we started could be compared in a way, because we both the work are dealing with nature and artifacts. In a way, the Asplund Pavilion for Vatican Chapels is completely different because it was the starting point of a route, the place in which the Gunnar Asplund's project about Woodland Chapel was exposed, and was the starting point to read all the other chapels. Instead, even if the treatment of the outside was in a way to deal and repropose a kind of artificial microcosm that was dealing with the idea of wood, with the small shadows that you can find in the wood and under the trees and so on. So the shingles was an architectural artifact that was dealing and reproducing nature. In opposite, our pavilion for MPavilion is always dealing with nature, but in another way. All these idea of the geometrical structure and this idea of the mirror that are amplifying the nature and the human activities all around, that are working a kind of in a kaleidoscopic way. So it's always dealing with nature, but in another way, not reproducing or kind of interpreting nature, but amplifying in a way nature.
Thank you. And to deliver MPavilion, you have both been collaborating with Sean Godsall. Could you please describe this working relationship and also the notion of collaborating from afar?
Yes, so the collaboration with Sean Godsall started from some years ago, because the first collaboration we did is for the competition of the Australian Pavilion and the Biennale Gardens in Venice. Unfortunately, we didn't win, but and so Sean has come to Venice to give a lecture at the summer school of the Venice University. Also, for us in some way, the architecture of Sean Godsall is a kind of lighthouse in terms of the importance of, I really believe, of his attitude in the contemporary architecture and his example. So this consent also, in some terms, to speak the same language. That it means not in formal way, obviously. The same language, and we understand each other in a very easy way, because the attitude we have about architecture is very similar in some way, and this also consent to be easy to work from far, even if now we are absolutely trained to do all these things all around the world with this device, even if in the very daily activity as a school, we finish a workshop, studio with the students of Melbourne University last Friday, and everybody says, okay, we hope next year we will be able to meet again. But it's very important also to yes, work through Australia, Italy is a little bit far to meet often, but so I think these elements are improving this relationship. And also in the original program, it was supposed that we'll be in Melbourne now for the Living City Forum, and also it was supposed that to start at the building site, so it was occasion also to check some details and something, but we will do it through Sean with the MPavilion team working on together in this strange way. We hope we'll be able to travel to Australia soon, maybe for the finissage. Maybe.
Oh, well, we hope you can too, because it would be wonderful to have you here in person to see your finished pavilion in place. So we have all our limbs crossed that can happen. Traudy and Francesco, thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much to you.
Yeah.
The project for the temporary pavilion, commissioned by the Naomi Milgrom Foundation in Queen Victoria Gardens, investigate the condition of an architectural device as a powerful attractor and display of the creative and dynamic quality of the city of Melbourne, as previous editions have fully demonstrated. We are very pleased that our office has been commissioned to the design of MPavilion 2021.
The structure we image is a shimmering device that qualifies itself as an urban lighthouse that hosts and enlightens the cultural activities for the community planned for the 2021 summer season in Melbourne. The pavilion geometric abstraction qualifies its a stage intended to host a multiplicity of ever-changing events, such as the variation of the light that it will be able to reflect, a kaleidoscopic structure that reflects and amplifies activities, peoples and colors. For this reason, we call it the light catcher. The light catcher proposes itself as an urban sign of the consolidated role of civic place of the meeting and inspiration that distinguish the MPavilion in Queen's Victoria Garden. Its permeable system of ground supports U-shape qualified itself as a livable device in different ways that the intense program and the different types of event will require. In this unlucky pandemic period, the pavilion is thought also as a stage around which people gather to attend events and shows.
The pavilion is composed by a reticular steel structure in galvanized and painted tubular profiles that support a set of panels in a mirror finishing aluminum coating, reflecting lights, colors, activities and people who will use this space. All this surface will also function as a shading element. The three-dimensional mesh, based on a 2 by 2 by 2 meter square modules, define a volume with a base of 6 modules and a height of 3 modules. That covers an area of about 150 square meters. The structure seems to float above the ground level on a colored, organic, shaped crushed rubber surface, and it defines inside an hollow space. The three-dimensional lattice is supported by 4 pillars made by precast reinforced concrete. These elements, in force of the particular U-shaped form and smooth-edged design, can be used also as a sitting place.
A small circular kiosk hosts an useful space to shelter the service cart or the mobile seats, and it could be potential support of any specific activities. The pavilion is designed as a temporary structure that through the use of precast components can be easily relocated and can guarantee a longer life in accordance with the indication of the Naomi Milgrom Foundation brief.